You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, everybody? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Today, we've got a pretty big one. I've got some UFC events to cover from last week, and then I got, the pay-per-view, obviously, to cover from this week, which was incredible. I mean, what else to expect from UFC's Madison Square Garden card or whatever? They're usually always really good, except for that one dud back in, I think, 2018, which I think it was Cormier versus fucking Derek Lewis, and I think that was just more made so, one, DC can defend his heavyweight title, and two, so they could have a main event, because I think they were having problems with that main event, if I remember correctly. So, yeah. But, every other Madison Square Garden card has been just incredible. But before we begin, we obviously have the first half to talk about whatever the hell we want. Today, I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on the first half of the podcast, mainly because I have an entire event from last week to cover and then this week, but I did actually just want to do this real quick, kind of dedicate the first half of the podcast, because it is with heavy heart that myself here at Dill's Dojo podcast is, it's unfortunate to announce that Anthony Rumble Johnson, one of the scariest light heavyweights in MMA, one of the hardest hitters in MMA, has passed away at the age of 38. They don't know exactly what. All we've been given is that it was due to an illness. He had been dealing with an illness for quite some time. I remember back in 2021, I think near the end of 2021, he was slated to appear in the light heavyweight semifinal. I want to say the light heavyweight Grand Prix semifinal, because he beat the alternate guy that they kind of gave him in the first round, which unfortunately would have been the last fight of his life. That was May 2021, where he knocked out, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but it was supposed to be his return back to MMA in 2 years, I think, at that point, honestly. And unfortunately, yeah, it would be the last fight in his life. Not on his contract, in his life, unfortunately. All we knew, he pulled out of a fight later that year due to an undisclosed illness. He had stated when it was announced that he had pulled out due to the illness that this illness was non-COVID related, first of all, but it was an illness that he said he had to dig deep for, that he feared for his safety with this illness, but didn't go anywhere beyond that. Nobody did. We didn't know a single thing. Unfortunately, it seems that he still had that illness today, as of November 13th, 2022. That's when he passed. That's when we're recording. And he unfortunately succumbed to the illness. So it's with heavy heart that we have to announce that. My condolences, obviously, are with his family in such a difficult time. I'm sure he was so young, incredibly healthy, for the most part, minus that illness. It's got to come a shock to the family. It's got to come as a shock. And like I said, my heart, my condolences are with them right now, because they need it. They need all the support they can get right now. So my heart and my condolences are with his family. So I just wanted to take a little bit to kind of talk about what Rumble Johnson kind of meant to me, because he was one of the first light heavyweights that I actually really enjoyed watching. Obviously, DC was the other one, but I think the first time I ever actually saw him live was UFC 187, when he was ironically up against Daniel Cormier for the vacant light heavyweight title. And the first time I ever knew that I liked this man and that I was going to love him as a fighter was one of the first shots he landed in that fight in the main event of UFC 187. He lands I think it was an overhand, might have been just a simple right hook, but he landed it so hard. He launches Daniel Cormier halfway across the octagon and has him wobbling the rest of the way to the other side of the octagon. It was some insane shit. He obviously ended up losing via rear naked choke, I think in the second round of that fight, but just the fucking sheer power that man possessed, and the fact that he sent Daniel Cormier that far was just incredible to me. And then the next time he really came on my radar was not when he kind of KO'd Gustafsson. I was kind of upset about that because I really liked Gustafsson, but it was UFC 202 when he sent Glover Teixeira's tooth into fucking orbit. I remember watching it with a buddy of mine. It was one of those shitty pirated streams back on my old fucking country internet where everything was laggy and the shittiest quality. And all of a sudden, 1 second, they're, gauging each other out. Next thing I know, it looks like Glover's head's going into orbit and he's out cold. And it was I think 12 or fucking 15 seconds, 30 seconds, somewhere along there. It was within the first minute and it was quick. I remember they showed a replay, and even though I could hardly see it with the shitty quality, you could see Glover's tooth. And it was insane, dude. It was the second time that he ever really came on my radar, and I knew then, I was like, I gotta really follow this guy. This guy is killing people in the cage. What the fuck? So with that, he obviously went on another chance against Daniel Cormier, which led to him obviously pulling out the first one, which even though he pulled out of that fight and everybody thought it was going to ruin that card, UFC 206 ended up being one of the best cards in recent memory, despite only having an interim title for a main event, and it was awesome. But they ended up actually meeting up at UFC 210 in one of the most weird ways for someone to lose the title. It was almost as if he didn't even try at all. He was standing with Daniel Cormier, and I can't remember the exact sequence, but I do remember that he just shot for a takedown on an Olympic-level wrestler. I'm not kidding. He shot for a takedown on an Olympic-level wrestler, and it led to him getting choked out in the first round. And afterwards, he retired in one of the most odd ways possible. He retired in cage, which is normal for fighters, but it was like his corner just kind of walked away from him. His whole corner just walked away from him and left him alone in the cage to do his interview. It was really upsetting. But after that, he retired. He went on a semi-successful business venture selling CBD and other weed products, which I thought was awesome. And then he decided to come out of retirement, and it was reported he was going to come out of retirement for bare knuckle. But it turned out he was only doing promotional material for bare knuckle, kind of similar to when Rich Franklin went over to ONE, and everybody thought, oh shit, Rich Franklin's coming back. Nope, Rich Franklin was just doing a promotional thing for them. It was basically the same thing. He was basically like their ambassador or whatever. But a lot of people were thinking Rumble was going to come back and murder someone in the bare knuckle brawl. Nope, that didn't happen. He ended up coming back in 2021 though. We all know how that went. Obviously, we all know he won by knockout. I believe it was in the second round too. And we all know now it ended up being the last fight of his life, which was really upsetting. Honestly, really upsetting. Because, I mean, you kind of expect it. He wasn't well, but he's still so young. You know what I mean? He's still so young, and you never want to see that happen, right? You never want to see that type of thing happen. But, life is very cruel. And, unfortunately, that's what happens, is, life isn't always fair. And it always seems to be the good ones that always get taken away. And I always like to say, I'm not much of a religious man. I don't know if a lot of you that are listening are. But I always like to say, to kind of make myself feel better, that, God takes the good ones because he's done with them. They've served their purpose. They've done their good. You know what I mean? So it's time for them to return. And that kind of gives me a little bit of a nice warm feeling inside. But it still is upsetting and very unfair that God just always seems to take the good ones. And I know there's probably going to be people listening to this saying, but he'd been tried for domestic battery 3 times. And every single time, if you look into the actual cases, it was just a case of anger management. No actual strikes were thrown. Nobody was genuinely hurt whatsoever. I think the worst to come out of it was, I think the first one, which a broken phone happened, which is pretty serious. Destroying someone's property is emotional abuse. But it seemed more like a man who had struggled with anger issues and knew not to lay hands on someone, but still struggled with those issues. So he took it out in other ways. And, every single time he'd go and get help. Help can only do so much. But this recent time, I believe the most recent one was 2019. And I remember that one was more ridiculous than anything. I can't remember the exact, I can't remember the exact fucking thing of it, but I remember it was his girlfriend at the time. They got into an argument, and I don't know if she got aggressive, and instead of him getting aggressive back, he picked her up and lifted her over his shoulder, and then brought her into another room and set her down. And that at that moment, she called the cops because she feared for her life, but nothing else happened. That ended up being thrown out. All three of them, in fact, actually ended up being thrown out, funnily enough. But everybody, including all of his compatriots and opponents, have said that he is such a humble and nice human being inside and outside of the cage. Daniel Cormier especially. Daniel Cormier had quite some kind words to say, as well as Glover. So, you know, it's truly going to be a genuine heart in MMA missed. So, you know, my heart's out to his family, and so are my condolences. And honestly, to end it off, just rest in peace, Rumble. Rest in peace, Anthony Johnson. It's an unfortunate way to say goodbye, but you're at peace. So, rest in peace. Anyway, with that, we'll be getting into the fights now. I've got 2 events to cover, so that's going to be great. But before we do that, as always, a message from my lovely sponsor, my favorite energy drink, Dubby. Before we get into the podcast, I just want to talk to you guys about my new sponsor, Dubby. What is Dubby? Dubby is a powdered energy drink that is actually a clean energy drink that's made to give you a focus with no crash or jitters or any angst that the other energy drinks on the market give you. They're also made with no maltodextrin fillers. They don't use any artificial dyes or any coloring, anything like that. And on top of that, Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, nootropics, and caffeine that keeps you going. And on top of that, it's gluten-free. So if you're worried about your gluten intake, it's okay. These guys got you covered. And if you're worried about it coming out of a facility that's not FDA approved or FDA inspected, these guys, they're doing it legit. Their product's made in an FDA inspected facility, and their product is FDA approved. So if you want to try any of these awesome flavors, because let's be honest, I'm about to tell you this, their flavors are all unique. You're not going to find a flavor anywhere else, only here at Dubby. So if you want to try 3 of their awesome new flavors in a starter pack with your own mixer cup, go on their website, pick the starter pack. It's $14.99. If you want to get 10% off of it, use Dillo's Dojo at checkout. That's DILLOS at checkout for 10% off. Once again, I want to thank Dubby for sponsoring the podcast. Anyway, enjoy your Dubby drink if you manage to use my code. Let's get back to the fights, folks. Alrighty, let's get into the first set of fights, which was last week's card, which actually was a strawweight main event between Amanda Lemos and Marina Rodriguez. And it was a really good fight, actually, for a women's strawweight bout. Very fast pace, a lot of shit happening, a lot of punches being thrown, very back and forth. It was just a nice fight to watch. But we're not going to get into that quite yet. We have a whole preliminary card and a couple of main card fights to go through. We're not going to go through them in detail because we have an entire 15-fight card to basically roll through, and I'm going to try to do this quick. So, let's get into these fights. The first fight was originally supposed to be a bantamweight fight between Tamires Vidal and Ramona Pascual, but unfortunately ended up being a catchweight to 137 pounds. So let's get into that. Tamires Vidal beats Ramona Pascual due to a vicious flying knee to the body. It landed to the body, which just crumpled Ramona Pascual, rendering her useless and not, able to continue. And if that wasn't enough for your bloodlust, we had quite a few finishes on the card. Out of, I believe there was 11 fights. I think 11 fights. Out of 11 fights, only 2 fights went to decision. The rest of them were finishes. So, the next fight was Jake Hadley versus Carlos Candelario. First round, Carlos Candelario did pretty damn good against Jake Hadley. Put the pressure on him. Really, really nullified a lot of his game plan. But Jake Hadley rallied halfway through the round. Really started to get his stride. And then in the second round, really started to make things work. As when they were on the ground, he just landed a tight triangle choke that forced Carlos Candelario to tap. And if that wasn't enough, well, we have to stop here for a bit. But that ain't it for the finishes, because once we get to the main card, it's all finishes, baby. But before we go, bantamweight bantamweight main event, my bad, bantamweight fight on the prelims. Johnny Munoz versus tough alumni Ludwig Shaolinian. And man, Johnny Munoz, close fight, but Johnny Munoz showing why he's the more veteran guy in this promotion, puts the work on him, wins a unanimous decision, 30-27 on 2 scorecards, 29-28 on 1. Dominant. And if that wasn't enough, we had a quick fight between Polyana Viana and Jin Yu Frey. Polyana Viana just putting on the pressure on Jin Yu Frey. And as Jin Yu Frey's backing up, lands a nice combo that just flatlines Jin Yu Frey. A nice little 1-2 combo that lands clean and knocks her out cold. 47 seconds into the first round. My God, are you not entertained? That's not it. This is still the prelims, guys. Let's point that out there. This is the fucking prelims we're talking about. This was last week's card, mind you. So, we're not done. We got another catchweight bout between Mario Bautista and Benito Lopez. This one was fun. Both guys are known to bang, but they're very well-rounded, very explosive fighters. But ultimately, it was Mario Bautista who just, for some reason, Benito Lopez looked out of it, and Mario Bautista just completely dominated him in the end. And near the end of the first round, scoring a reverse triangle armbar to put an end to the fight. And if you didn't have enough of your bloodlust for domination, to cap off the prelims, we had Miranda Maverick up against Shauna Young. Let's be real. I'm no matchmaker. God, I don't even work for an MMA promotion. I would love to. I think I have some of the know-how to help. But I'm no matchmaker. But to me, looking at this matchup, I feel like Shanna Young was very outmatched against Miranda Maverick. And it seemed the fight agreed. Because the entire fight, Miranda Maverick completely dominated Shanna Young. At one point, looked very close to finishing her, and it looked like the ref was going to step in. 30-26, it scored her a 10-8 round in that one, and all 3 rounds was a complete domination. Just 30-26 on every single scorecard. We didn't have a single different scorecard on this one. It was complete domination from round 1 to round 3. It was insane. Now, this next fight, opening up the main card, was supposed to be a preliminary fight. We were supposed to have, I believe, 7 fights on the main card, or on the preliminaries, I believe. Unfortunately, we had a heavyweight bout between Chase Sherman and Josh Parisian. Just drop. I think due to Josh Parisian encountering some medical issues on the day of the fight that could not be resolved. So unfortunately, we lost that fight. But Grant Dawson and Mark Madsen bringing the chaos as both guys going back and forth, showing their grappling prowess. But surprisingly, Grant Dawson scoring the rear naked choke on the Olympic medalist, Mark Madsen, scoring the rear naked choke in the 3rd round and upsetting the masses, as Mark Madsen is an incredible ground game guy. His wrestling is second to none in the division, and honestly, was very surprising to see this. But that wasn't it. We had Tagir Ulanbekov versus Nate Maness, and this was a quick one. Complete domination from start to finish. It got to the ground, and it was all Ulanbekov until the guillotine choke was sunk in deep. My lord, folks. We had 3 fights left. I told you. We're not done. We have plenty of finishes. 3 more finishes. I'm not done. Right? Let's get into this. Shalinian Nurendibek, I think his name is, and Derek Minner. Derek Minner getting TKO'd by some violent elbows. Man, some very violent elbows. Very nicely landing. Thankfully, he didn't go out cold. Thankfully, the ref stepped in because he was eating those elbows and they were very nasty. I'm just going to say Shalian because I'm not going to bother pronouncing that name. Shalian wins via TKO in the first round via a violent domination of just elbows. My God. Next was the co-main event, where it was a very closely fought fight. Neil Magny versus Daniel Rodriguez. Neil Magny stuck to a grappling heavy game plan. Daniel Rodriguez did an incredible job steering it off for the most part, though. But Neil Magny, he's an incredible grappler when he really wants to be, managed to score a Darce choke in the 3rd round with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left. 3-3-3-3. I'm not kidding. But it was a nice Darce choke. I, for one, have a little soft spot for Darce chokes. Guillotine chokes and Darce chokes are some of my favorite chokes to see. Rear naked choke is a close third. But just for some reason, man, I love Darce chokes. They're very far first. I love Darce chokes. They're so intricate, so nice. Like, it's just so crazy that you can just choke someone when, like, from the, like, you can choke someone other than just a regular front choke from the front and do it in a crazy, tight, like, wrapped up way. I just love Darce chokes. I should stop talking about Darce chokes. I love them so much. The next fight is the main event, though. So, Amanda Lemos versus Marina Rodriguez. This fight was very back and forth. Could have been anyone's fight. Now, near the end of the first round, second round, Amanda Lemos got Marina Rodriguez. Looked like she was kind of hurt, but, not too hurt. Enough where the minute between rounds was enough to potentially recover. And we thought she did, but going into the third round, Amanda Lemos kind of gauging the distance a bit to see what shots she can land, but she was landing at will, landing some heavy punches. She had Marina Rodriguez backed up, basically, coming into a minute into the third, and the ref was forced to step in. It was a perfect stoppage, too. A lot of people were calling it bullshit. I thought it was a good stoppage. I thought, Amanda Lemos was doing enough damage to warrant the stoppage. Marina Rodriguez wasn't doing enough to defend herself, and the ref stepped in and saved her from taking any unnecessary punishment. But, people are always going to call bullshit on certain stoppages, certain decisions. It's the name of the game. It's the name of the sport. You got to kind of get used to it. But that's it for our boy. Well, not our boy, but our lovely fight night card that I was going to be covering. The next one is the pay-per-view, though. The one that you guys want to actually hear about this week. The big meat and potatoes. So, without further ado, let's get into this entire card. I'm not going to go into detail. Don't worry. I'm not going to go into detail. Well, I won't go into detail on the prelims because there's 2 sets of prelims with fucking 10 fights in total. That's 10 fights I will be going into vicarious detail with. And I don't want to do that. So, we're not going to do that. But the prelims. First off, we had a light heavyweight bout between Carlos Ulberg and Nikolai Negumereanu. Carlos Ulberg, in the first round, putting on the pressure, lands a beautiful combo to put Nikolai out. Lands a beautiful knockout in the first round. Carlos Ulberg scores himself a nice knockout on a huge card, on a huge stage, may I add. The next fight was a bantamweight bout between Montel Jackson and Julio Arce. I was very surprised with how this fight went. It was very much, I want to say, like, one round for Julio, but Montel Jackson, man, did way better than I actually thought he was going to. And that was a pleasant surprise. I'm not going to lie. I actually enjoyed it. He ended up winning a 30-27, and 29-28 decision over Julio Arce, which is not what I had at all. I had Julio winning by submission in third round. This decision was not what I had at all. But, like I said, pleasant surprise. The third fight of the night was originally supposed to be a featherweight, but Mike Trezano missed weight, unfortunately, and that kind of seemed to have paid dividends because he ended up scoring the knockout on Choi Sung-woo in the first round near the closing seconds of that round. And it was a nice knockout, too. Very nice knockout. But, I can't talk about knockouts without, the early preliminary card headliner. But before we get to that, we had a very close contest between my favorite strawweight, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and Silvana Gomez Juarez. And Karolina came to show up, came to win, and rallied to get a very close but very clear 29-28 decision on all judges' scorecards. It was a great win for her. I feel like she's starting to really get back on track, and you just love to see it. I love Karolina. She's such a wholesome, sweet woman, and I love to see that she's getting back on track in winning ways. It's great. But I promised you a knockout, and my buddy, Matt Frivola, one of my mutuals on Twitter, one of the coolest guys ever, was fighting Ottman Azater. You guys know Ottman. I talked about him like a year back. I want to say back in January of 2021. I talked about him. He was supposed to fight Matt Frivola on UFC 257's card, but, fuck it. I'll tell the story. I love telling the story. Ottman got caught breaking COVID protocol getting somebody outside of his COVID circle to bring him a bag of a suspicious thing. Like, nobody knew what was in the bag. Nobody still knows what is in the bag. When people ask Ottman, he either gets testy about it or he jokes about it and laughs it off. He doesn't tell anybody what's in the bag. But he got caught on CCTV footage accepting a bag from someone who wasn't in the circle, who probably shouldn't have been around the fighters or in the hotel, and he got in trouble for it. I believe he got sent home. His fight was scratched. I believe his contract was terminated for a little bit as well. It got him into huge shit with the UFC. And the entire fight was scrapped. Matt Frivola moved on. Ottman moved on. However, Dana and the matchmakers figured, let's make it. You know, better late than never. I don't think it's late at all, however. I thought it was a perfect time for both guys. They're basically in the twilight of their careers. Matt Frivola is starting to get back into the swing of things. Ottman Azaitar is on a tear. No pun intended. So I just thought it was, you know, a great fight. I thought it was a great fight, a great matchup. I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was. And for the most part, in the entire 2 minutes and 30 seconds the fight lasted, it was pretty back and forth with both guys landing quick and explosive shots. But ultimately, Matt Frivola against the cage caught Ottman coming in. Ottman swinging and looping crazily. And Matt Frivola lands a beautiful left hook that just lands clean, knocking Ottman out. Like, just out cold. He drops. His legs just give way. He drops out cold. Beautiful knockout. I'm really happy for my boy Matt. Matt Frivola deserves the best. And honestly, incredible win by him. Incredible knockout. This next fight, this is the start of the ESPN card now. The ESPN prelim card. Not the fucking Fight Pass card. So, the first fight was another tough alumni from last year, Andre Petroski, up against Wellington Turman. I don't know why Wellington Turman is here. It's kind of an odd fucking pick. But Andre Petroski going up against Wellington Turman, complete domination, basically. Just an absolute clinic put on by Andre Petroski. He ended up just getting the unanimous decision. It was basically 30-27 on all scorecards, except for one judge. It was just complete domination. And if you want to know about more complete dominations, we had Aaron Blanchfield versus Molly McCann, which, like last week's card, the Shauna Young, Miranda Maverick fight, what the fuck was the goddamn matchmakers thinking with this one, is my thought process. Yes, Molly McCann's a decent fighter, but holy fuck, she has been hyped up way too much to her actual skill level. And I thought that was going to be very obvious with Erin Blanchfield, because Erin Blanchfield's a quiet woman, but she is a killer. And she showed that. There's a reason why this woman was an ADCC champ at 23. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why Erin Blanchfield was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champ at 23 years old. And she showed it last night. Completely dominated Molly McCann, took her to the ground. Molly McCann did good fighting off some submission attempts, but ultimately it wasn't enough. Erin Blanchfield just started cranking a nasty Kimura, forcing Molly McCann to tap, and it was very satisfying. Now I'm just hoping that the same fate befalls Patty, because Patty's Patty. But holy fuck, man. Just complete domination. Like I said, I don't know what the matchmakers were fucking thinking with that one. However, we had a fun fight. Unfortunately, Ryan Spann missed weight by like a pound, but we still had a fun fight. Didn't last long. Ryan Spann versus Dominic Reyes, and Ryan Spann knocking out Dominic Reyes with a nice fucking punch that lands clean. Just one punch that lands clean. Knocks him out cold. And before I continue to the next fight, I just have to say this, man. Or, not say this, but I have to ask this. Is Dom done? Like, is Dominic Reyes done? His last couple of fights have all ended by knockout, and not in his favor, mind you. He has been on the receiving end of a knockout loss in his last, 3 fights, I think. I don't know where to go from here. If he can't even stand against people like Ryan Spann, who, might I add, is no slouch, but just, he's not top ranked in the division, then, I think Dominic Reyes of old is gone. I think the guy who took John Jones to all 5 rounds and arguably won it, I think that guy's gone. I think he's very much gone. But, That's up to everybody else to think. I just figured I'd ask the question because, like I said, he's faced knockout in like the last 3 fucking fights he's had, and like I love the sport. I love the knockouts in the sport. I love the pure, unadulterated violence of the sport. But I'm still a human being with a heart, and I don't like seeing people get knocked out over and over and over and over and over again. It's one of the reasons why every time Bigfoot gets fucking like matched up for a fight or a boxing bout, I get really pissed off because that man has not won a fight since like 2016, 2015, something like that. And every single fight he's had, including his boxing bouts, have ended in knockout or TKOs, which is not good for the brain. I don't think I have to explain that, but I mean, for those who are a little uneducated, that's not good for the fucking brain. That will eventually cause a lot of brain swelling, which I don't know about you, but if the brain swells up to a point where it's pushing against the skull, it can cause some severe shit, including end game. No more life. You know what I mean? So, I don't like seeing stuff like that. So that's why I had to ask the question. But we're going to move on. Next up, Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. This one also surprised me. I had Brad Riddell winning via like a TKO or a decision. Moicano coming out with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and just surprising me and completely making me look like a fucking idiot to my friends. So good on you, Renato. But just the submission sequence itself was very slick, very impressive. I forgot how good Renato Moicano was on the ground. So, I mean, that's my bad. But just great submission by Renato. Very much shows why he's going to be a problem at lightweight. Not going to be a definitive problem, but going to be a problem for some guys at lightweight. It's very obvious. But anyway, that's it for the preliminary card. We have, 15 fights? That's about 10 down, and 7 of them have been finishes so far. And I'm not going to ruin anything, but the entire main card were finishes. So, don't expect a decision from here on out. Expect nothing but pure, unadulterated violence. One of which really actually upset me. So, I'm going to get into that in a bit. And expect me to get upset. But, I'm still happy for the man who's going to be named later. I just didn't want what happened to happen that way. But to start off the main card, we had a lightweight bout between the always fun to watch Dan Hooker and the up-and-coming Peruvian Claudio Puelles. Claudio Puelles has been on a tear. He's been showing that he's very dangerous in the lightweight division. He's an up-and-comer. Dan Hooker, on the other hand, has shown that he's on the decline and he needs to prove himself. And by golly, last night he proved himself. He put on the pressure on Claudio. Claudio had his moments. He hit Dan with a couple of good shots. But, Dan did a good job at keeping it on the feet, where it was basically the whole fight. And when it was on the feet, it was all Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker was landing at will with kicks, knees, a lot of fucking punches that were going through. And he was really working the body. And because of that, in the second round, he ended up actually, that paid dividends for him, man. That worked because he landed a nice, I believe it was a kick that actually folded Claudio Puelles and forced the TKO, the body kick TKO. It was nice. And it was a great work by Dan Hooker. It was very vintage Dan Hooker, actually. I really enjoyed watching it. But that wasn't it for finishes. That wasn't it for our bloodlust. We had another one. Unfortunately, it was a sacrifice that I didn't want to have to make. Chris Gutierrez versus Frankie Edgar. This one was kind of determined when the fight was made. We all knew, and I didn't want to admit it, but we all knew Frankie Edgar. We all knew Frankie was going to lose. We all knew Frankie Edgar was going to lose. But we were hoping it was going to be an insane back and forth where it was going to go to decision and Frankie was going to get the applause of everybody. So we wished, right? We didn't get that at all. The fight was pretty explosive for how long it lasted, but Frankie went in for, I can't remember if it was a takedown or if he was just ducking in for a body shot, but Chris Gutierrez landed it perfectly. Like, he timed it perfectly, landed a knee that just knocked Frankie Edgar out cold, and it really upset me because I just hate seeing legends like that. He ended up retiring. My lord. It was a very emotional time, but great knockout by Chris Gutierrez. He drops one of the most emotional post-fight, in-ring interviews ever. Fucking his coach, Mark Montoya, is battling a fucking kidney stone the entire fight week, so he's not feeling well. Then, during said fight week, gets diagnosed with fucking kidney cancer. So not only is he dealing, I think it's kidney cancer. It's some sort of cancer. I think it was kidney cancer. So not only was he dealing with a kidney stone, but then they found out said kidney stone was a fucking cancer. So this man, even though he's fighting cancer, doesn't feel well, was like, nah, I'm going to be here for Chris. And Chris said, like, I wasn't feeling well going into this fight, and Frankie hurt me with a shot. I think that happened earlier, but he even straight up said, he's like, I, because Coach Mark came here and he was battling cancer, but he kept going. He fought on for me. I'm gonna fight on for him. And you can just see Mark Montoya in the back, just smiling, like happy as fuck. And, like, all the respect to both guys. Chris Gutierrez with one of the most beautiful knockouts I've seen in the last couple of events. And on top of that, Mark Montoya being not only the biggest fucking badass ever, but being a genuine dude and a great coach to just be there for his fighter. Just incredible. But that wasn't it for our bloodlust. Even though the next fight ended in a rear naked choke, we had blood. We had violence. Because it was Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, baby. Oh, what a great fight between the two. Oh, fuck me, man. The first round was in just absolute calamity. They were gauging each other out, landing leg kicks, and then all of a sudden, Michael Chandler, as he does best, gets explosive with Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier defends it for a little bit, getting out of the way, very well, until he gets caught with a nice hook that looks like it hurts him. And fucking Michael Chandler smells blood. Has him pinned against the cage, starts landing uppercuts, fucking goes for the body. He's really mixing it up with his boxing. Looks like he's got Dustin Poirier pretty hurt. He's landing a couple of hooks that look like he's got Dustin Poirier on some wobbly legs. But no. Dustin Poirier fights back, throws a couple of jabs to steer him off, and weaves out of the way of the cage and gets back to the center. And next thing you know, bam! Just hits Michael Chandler with a nice hook that has Michael Chandler on wobbly legs. Lands a nice, right hook, almost a right straight that knocks Michael Chandler to all fours, but Michael Chandler right like that. Just a snap right back up to his feet. And as soon as he sees that, like I said, both guys are brutal. Dustin Poirier now smells blood in the water. Starts teeing off on him, walking him down. Has him against the cage in the final, couple, probably 20 seconds of the round, and just starts landing at will, bloodies, and I mean bloodies, Michael Chandler's face. It was a close round. It could have went to either guy. It could have went to Michael Chandler because he had Dustin hurt, and a good portion of the round was that, or it could have went to Dustin because Dustin did a good job steering off a lot of Michael Chandler's offense at the beginning and then stole the round at the end because of that, right? He got a genuine knockdown, while I don't think Michael Chandler did. He just had him on wobbly legs. So, it, like I said, could have went to anybody. And Michael Chandler knew that. So going into the second round, basically all Michael Chandler on the ground. A lot of scrambling from both guys, but Michael Chandler taking Dustin Poirier's back, very much threatening the rear naked choke, but Dustin Poirier ain't giving up. And the entire time, he is just struggling with Michael Chandler on his back until the very end of the round, where he gets back up, starts teeing off on Michael Chandler, bell goes. It's clearly Michael Chandler's round. Could have very well been a 10-8, because at one point, Michael Chandler had him in a weird mount position where he was just landing punches, and it looked like the ref could have stopped it. They were brutal punches, and they were landing every goddamn time at will. But Dustin Poirier, tough as they come, rallies back, third round, decides, you know what, fuck you. Gets taken down to the ground and scrambles. Takes Michael Chandler's back after scrambling. And like I said, Dustin Poirier basically saying, nah, dude, go fuck yourself. I'm the guy with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt here. Sinks in a rear naked choke quickly. That's deep, forcing Michael Chandler to tap almost instantly. It was just, great fight by both guys. Fucking incredible. Great submission by Dustin Poirier. I didn't think this card could get any better. But then we had Wei Lee versus Carla, man. I thought this was going to be boring, but Wei Lee coming out with the grappling right away on Carla. Carla not knowing what to do. Wei Lee surprisingly being the better grappler on Carla Esparza. And just after a good round of Wei Lee threatening on the back, Carla gets taken down again and gets scrambled on. And it was the weirdest scramble, dude. Wei Lee kind of has her back, that halfway point, and Carla is scrambling to keep it from happening. And then all of a sudden they get into a weird position where Carla's It's weird. Wei Li is on the bottom. Carla's on top. But the way Wei Li is, Wei Li's feet are facing completely far from Carla's right side. It's like they are making an A. If both bodies were together, they're making an A without the line going through the middle. But Wei Li has the neck deep and is just squeezing. And in the weirdest position, forces Carla Esparza to tap in the second round. And they counted it a rear naked choke. It was very weird, but great finish by Wei Li. Very emotional journey for Wei Li to get back to the belt after what she's been through, after the losses she's been, suffering. And man, what a great way to end the... Oh, wait, we're not done the card. We have one more fight left, and it's Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Poatan, boy. And my God, this fight delivered. We had basically an all-around kickboxing match. When it went to the ground, Izzy did a great job getting it to the ground. And Poatan, bro, Pereira, doing an incredible job keeping it on the feet, scrambling and actually defending himself on the ground. When I was watching, I was like, his grappling is actually way better than I actually anticipated, because I was thinking this was going to be a fucking kickboxer with like minimal grappling experience, because we didn't really get to see him tested in his 3 fights that he had. He didn't get tested in his 2 fights, and then he fought Sean Strickland, who should have tested him, because Sean Strickland's a pretty decent fucking grappler, let's be honest. Nope. Sean Strickland fought the most retarded fight ever, chin up, hands down, running ahead, gets caught by a dangerous kickboxer. So, I don't know what he was thinking. Earns this shot. The entire fight was just them basically on the feet. With a little bit of grappling here and there, it was basically them on the feet, hitting each other with some nice shots. End of the first round, Izzy hits him with a nice fucking hook that basically has him on wobbly legs. Second and third round, I think it's second round, Alex Pereira starts to kind of put up the heat, wins the second round. Third round, Israel starts playing a defensive tactic, pouring up the shots, the counter shots, landing some leg kicks, some pretty good leg kicks to kind of slow down Pereira. Same thing in the fourth round. But then it's almost like Glover in Pereira's corner just gave him this like Rocky type speech. Like, you gotta do it, Rock. You gotta beat him. It's your chance. You're down 3 rounds to 1. Wait, yeah, no, I did the math. You're down 3 rounds to 1, Rock. You gotta do this. And fucking Alex Pereira just heard the Rocky theme, that da 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 da, and he just was like, yeah, I've got this, man. I've got this. And just started fucking teeing off on Israel. Izzy got some good shots in that 5th round, but holy fuck, it was like Pereira had been just kind of holding in all of his energy until this very moment. I want to say like a minute 20 into the 5th round, he hits Izzy with a nice shot, smells blood, and just does not let up. Starts walking Izzy down, landing some good shots, lands a nice left hook that hurts Izzy, then lands a nice right hook that actually drops Izzy and has Izzy almost stumbling against the cage, and he just does not let up even then, and just keeps continuing landing shot after shot after shot, to the point where, yeah, Izzy was bobbing and weaving, but a lot of what he was bobbing and weaving was into the punches. There was only 2 punches that he actually bobbed and weaved out of the way of, and that was at the point where Pereira was just being sloppy with his punches. He just wanted them to land. He knew he had the finish, and the ref stepped in. It was a good stoppage, in my opinion. A lot of people were very upset about the stoppage, but it was a good stoppage. With the way Izzy was, yes, he was slightly bobbing and weaving, but his hands were down. He was eating a lot of shots. And the way he wasn't grounded. He was bent over. It was open for the taking. If that went on, he would have eaten more punches, or he would have eaten a fucking vicious knee straight up the middle, which would have knocked him out cold. So, great stoppage by Mark Goddard. And, I was shocked. I was shocked when it happened. Alex Pereira is the new middleweight champion. Still feels surreal to talk about. It really does. But, fuck. What a night. I love to say it because it's true always. Madison Square Garden never ceases to deliver. Never, ever, ever ceases to deliver. So, just, went to bed with just knowing that was an incredible card. I got treated to one of the fucking greatest cards of the year, in my opinion. So, just 10 out of 10. And one more thing before we go, because I don't like it. I don't like it. But before we talk about what I don't like, next week's event, we have Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak in the main event. That's going to be in Nevada. It's going to be another Vegas one. Oddly enough, Iwan Kutalaba and Kennedy Nzechukwu being the co-main. Hidalgo Vieira versus Cody Brundage being the featured bout before the two mains. Chase Sherman getting another fight against Waldo Cortez Acosta, which actually I believe was supposed to happen earlier this year, but never ended up actually happening. I think an injury happened, and then like plans to reschedule it fizzled out. Now it's happening again. Another fight on the main card is Andre Fiallo versus Muslim Salikov, and then opening up the card is Jack Della Maddalena versus Danny Roberts. We have Charles Johnson versus Zaglas Zumagulov, Jennifer Maia versus Marina Moroz, Vince Morales versus Mal Johns, which is going to be a great fight in my opinion. Kevin Natividad, who's making his return after quite a while, up against Ricky Turcios, one of the more eccentric fighters at bantamweight, which is also going to be a fun fight. I'm worried that Ricky's going to do his weird fucking shuriken bullshit again and lose the fight. Women's strawweight bout between Vanessa Demopoulos and Maria Oliveira. Brady Heastand's coming back against Fernie Garcia, and opening up the entire card is Natalia Silva and Taritza Bleda. We did have, I believe there's another fight. I don't know if it's official still. It should be. I don't know why it hasn't been, but I don't know if it's actually been announced, but apparently William Knight and Marcin Prachnio was supposed to be on the card. I don't know if it's still gonna be. It's literally a week out before the event, and it's still not on the announced card, so I don't know. But I do know that William Knight was supposed to face Marcin Prachnio on that card, and it never actually happened. But that's it for next week's card. I'm a little excited for it. It's kind of a weird card to cover, but, the ones that never really look good on paper usually do the best in actual practice, so I'm excited for it. But I know I alluded to a bit of news I didn't like. Two bits of news that I don't like. First of all, Jake Paul is slated to fight Andrew Tate. I don't know if it's going to be official, but they've been talking a lot about it, and they're in talks right now. I think they're making negotiations for it to happen, so it might fucking happen, and I don't like the prospect of me rooting for Jake Paul in a fight. But if that actually happens, if he ends up going for Tate, I'm gonna be rooting for Jake Paul, even though I'm pretty sure Tate's gonna win. But I don't know if that's gonna happen. It's just been a negotiation rumor. I don't know if it's gonna go through though. The other one, which is official, and I don't like it, and a lot of people don't like it, is Alexander Volkanovski is going up to 155 to face Islam Makhachev for his title. I have a few problems with that. There's still a couple of guys at featherweight that deserve shots at the title. Josh Emmett being one of them. A big one. And at lightweight, Makhachev, even though, yes, the guys at the top 5 have all been beaten by the former champion, again, MMA math doesn't work, so Makhachev needs to go through people like Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler, the actual fucking top 5. But that's not going to happen, because now we have a pointless super fight that, I'm sorry to Volk fans, I love Volk, the dude's a cool fucking dude, like very down to earth. I would love to have beers with him, man. I would love to just party and just watch fights with him, man. He's that type of guy, very down to earth, very cool. But I just don't see him in any way winning against Makhachev. Makhachev is just as well-rounded as Volk is, if not better, is bigger than Volk, is taller than Volk. I know Volk used to be heavyweight at one point, but he's not now, and hasn't been for a bit. And like I said, Volk is 5'6", while Islam's like 6 foot. That's quite a bit of a disadvantage. So yeah, I don't like that one bit. I think, actual contenders deserve their shots still. I think Makhachev should at least defend it once or twice before actually going for a super fight. And I think Volk should at least fight Emmett to give him his fucking title shot finally, and then fight for the fucking lightweight title. Because I'm gonna be honest, I love Josh Emmett. I think he deserves his title shot, and I really think he should get it. He's gonna lose it, but I think he should get it. But yeah, I don't like the UFC 284 main event. It's a cool main event, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's right. I think there's way more deserving people that deserve the shot than Volk does. But hey, whatever brings tickets in, whatever fucking sells the pay-per-view, right? So, I mean, whatever. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Once again, my thoughts and prayers are with the Rumble Johnson family. Anthony Johnson was an absolute staple in MMA, a very well-known face to hardcore MMA fans, and honestly, his passing came as a shock to everyone on MMA Twitter. When the news broke, everyone couldn't believe it. A lot of people were like, I need an actual, official source to break it before I say anything, because no, there's no way, but unfortunately, it was true. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next episode. We have the Lewis versus Spivak fight to cover next episode, and then that'll probably be it. I'll think of some crazy shit to talk about at the beginning of half of the next episode. You never know. Something crazy might happen in the next week. Anyway, that's it for the episode. I hope you guys have an incredible work week, because I know you're going to be listening to this on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday that this is going to be out. It's going to be out on the Monday, so the entire work week. I hope you guys have an incredible whole-ass work week, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your work week.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.